Walls, not bridges, the economics of Trump-era protectionism. In early April, just days after Trump declared April 5th Economic Liberation Day, his administration unleashed a sweeping and erratic wave of tariffs. A 10% universal tariff on most imports went into effect, followed by reciprocal tariffs based on trade deficits and a dramatic spike in tariffs on Chinese goods, jumping as high as 125%. The table and statistics here illustrate this inconsistency. However, beneath the numbers is a deeper pattern, a strategy driven less by economic logic and more by symbolic gestures, short-term leverage, and political theater. In the following sections, we'll explore the motivations behind this approach, assess its broader consequences, and propose solutions to bring coherence and credibility back to U.S. trade policy. Trump's approach reflects a clear return to protectionism. The goal was to reverse decades of offshoring by making imports more expensive, thus making U.S. production more attractive. The chart on the right shows that tariff rates are directly scaled to the size of each country's trade deficit with the U.S. China, with the highest deficit of $270.4 billion, faced a 34% tariff. Countries like Vietnam and Cambodia, with similarly large imbalances, were hit even harder. The outsourcing map on the left underscores why these tariffs matter. They targeted regions central to U.S. supply chains, with over $100 billion tied up in outsourcing to India, China, and Southeast Asia. The administration's tariff push wasn't just about deficits. It was an attempt to disrupt global supply and force a shift back to domestic manufacturing. This quote from Vice President Vance reinforces the administration's protectionist rhetoric. Outsourcing doesn't just shift jobs overseas, it erodes America's capacity for innovation production. By invoking World War II shipbuilding, he seems to warn of national security concerns. Without domestic manufacturing, the U.S. could be unprepared in times of crisis. Trump often frames tariffs not just as a trade tool, but as a source of national income. Trump's quote here captures the essence of his America First narrative. Tariffs promise billions, even trillions flowing in. The messaging is bold and holds a simple logic. As other countries pay more, Americans pay less. It's a populist appeal that positions tariffs as a patriotic revenue strategy. We'll investigate later if tariffs really do yield these results for Americans. Lastly, tariffs can serve as powerful tools of negotiation by leveraging the sheer size of America's consumer market. Because foreign exporters rely heavily on U.S. buyers, these tariffs can pressure foreign governments to make concessions. U.S. Trade Representative Greer's quote to the left here reflects a frustration with the multilateral trade system, where the U.S. sees itself as having played by the rules while others imposed barriers. By leveraging tariffs, it seems Trump aims to rebalance trade on his own terms.
Now, let's move on to the specific impacts that Trump's protectionist policies will have. To understand how tariffs affect the economy, focus on the shifts in the home market graph. A tariff raises the domestic price from the world price PW to PW plus T. This causes two main shifts. One is that domestic supply increases from S1 to S2 as local producers ramp up output at the higher price, and two is that consumer demand falls from D2 to D1 because goods are now more expensive. This results in a drop in imports, shown by the shrinking gap between demand and supply. The government gains tariff revenue, Area C, but at a cost. Areas B and D represent deadweight loss or lost economic efficiency. Fewer mutually beneficial trades occur, and resources are misallocated. On top of decreasing economic output and efficiency, the distortions caused by the tariffs can ripple into the economy, affecting key economic variables. GDP declines because of overall output falls due to the reduced consumption and trade. Inflation rises as tariffs make goods more expensive for consumers, and though tariff rate revenue increases, this comes from higher prices paid by domestic buyers, hidden in a consumption tax. To fully quantify these effects, various economic models, such as those made by the Yale Budget Lab and Wharton, project real GDP decreasing anywhere from 0.6 to 6%. Meanwhile, inflation is projected to increase by an additional 2.6% from tariffs on top of the current 2.8% US inflation rate. Finally, tariff revenue is projected to gain around $5.2 trillion during 10 years. Although we do expect increased employment in the manufacturing industry from these tariffs, we believe that the employment gain will be underwhelming compared to the Trump administration's expectations. This is because compared to typical trade tariff policy, Trump's unpredictability when implementing tariffs, such as frequent shifts in timing, scope, and target, can give companies pause before actually investing in US manufacturing. Meanwhile, rising unemployment is near certain for jobs outside of the manufacturing sector as higher input prices, skyrocketing trade policy uncertainty, and decreasing profit margins will force companies to cut jobs, as seen by Volvo's plans to lay off 800 US workers. Over the long term, manufacturing employment is unlikely to return to mid-1900s levels, largely due to technology-driven job displacement, something Trump's tariffs don't address. As a result, the expected boost in manufacturing jobs is unlikely to materialize. Moreover, since openness is negatively correlated with long-term unemployment, Trump's tariffs, which reduce openness, are projected to increase overall unemployment. This aligns with Goldman Sachs' estimates that nearly 500,000 US jobs could be lost due to his tariffs. Trump's tariffs create a demand shock and risk creating a recessionary cycle as well. Already, signs of this are emerging as consumer confidence is at an all-time low, and inventory in consumer discretionary is rising, outpacing sales for the first time in years. This signals weak consumer demand, cash flow strains for firms, and potential production cuts. Tariff retaliation could further exacerbate these issues, threatening a potential recession. A historic parallel to Trump's tariffs is the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Act, which raised tariffs by 20%, triggered a trade war, caused U.S. equities to plunge to 80%, and contributed to the Great Depression. Given Trump's tariffs are reaching similar levels, the risk of a U.S. recession increases in light of this precedent.
There are also significant political impacts of tariffs, particularly as they strain America's alliances with key trading partners such as countries in the EU, Canada, and Japan as they are hit with tariffs. This alienates longtime partners, making America being seen as an unpredictable ally, and thus other countries may seek new alliances with others such as China. And this, to some, signals the beginning of the end of globalization, where there's a risk of retaliatory tariffs, where countries place tariffs on each other, sparking fears of a global trade war and thus tariffs signal a shift towards America protectionism. There are also social impacts, as tariffs finance tax cuts for the rich while resulting in higher prices for everybody, especially harming the poor. These two factors exacerbate wealth inequality, which is already high and growing, as seen as the chart on top. And thus, tariffs harm those who are financially struggling the most in our economy. Tariffs are a blunt tool, but other policies can offer fairer and more collaborative solutions to support American industries, increase employment, and increase American GDP. The first solution targets the impacts on small and medium-sized enterprises, which have the highest marginal propensity to consume, or PMC, making them the most efficient at boosting demand per dollar of government aid. The first aspect of our plan is capping costs for these businesses to reduce the current cost of complying with export regulations, which is on average about $300,000 per year. The second aspect of this plan is where the government can streamline the 21,000 export regulations, which is across 8 different governmental agencies, and through cutting bureaucratic red tape, it makes it easier for these businesses to export their products. Finally, we can establish a targeted tariff relief fund by providing aid to businesses based on tariff exposure, contribution towards employment, and establishing commitments to reshore production. The second aspect of our solution is through technology, as technological change has been the main driver of U.S. job losses, and advances in tech is crucial for future growth. The first aspect of our plan is through retraining younger workers in future-oriented industries, such as in the green energy sector. Secondly, we hope to establish an education industry partnership, which is where we can have collaborations between community colleges, industries, and the government to provide workers with certifications in fields such as logistics and robotics. And finally, we can support displaced workers by providing wage insurance, job placement services to help them transition into new jobs where they will thrive. And thus, Trump's tariffs do more harm than good, raising prices and straining global alliances. It's time to adopt smarter, longer-term solutions that can also support American workers, encourage innovation, and strengthen our economy. Thank you.